Dear colleagues, Ministry of Defense spokesperson Mr. Vilyen Pidgornyy will speak on Russian military aggression in eastern Ukraine. Mr. Pidgornyy, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Let me give you a weekly update on the events of the military conflict and Russian aggression against Ukraine between October 24th and 30th. Ukrainian representatives of the Joint Center for Control and Coordination reported that Russia-backed militants refused to guarantee safety for construction workers on a mission to fix infrastructure facilities in the frontline areas. This includes restoring water and power supply to Avdiivka Cox plant, demining areas near the Bakhmut Agrarian Union, repairing Novhorodske phenol plant, and gas distribution station in Krasnohorivka, so that the gas supply could be restored to dozens of thousands of private households in the region. The actions of Russian proxies inflict further suffering on civilians left without basic services, as well as add to the already dangerous state of the local environmental conditions. This comes against the backdrop of dozens of industries in the occupied areas in eastern Ukraine being dismantled and illegally transported to the Russian Federation. Russian-backed militants kept on violating ceasefire on a daily basis across the whole front line. Overall, the number of hostile attacks registered was between 34 on October 25th at its lowest, up to 72 on October 26th at its highest. There were also 6 incidents when hostile drones were detected. Militants used them for aerial reconnaissance of Ukrainian military positions, primarily in the Mariupol sector. Russian proxy forces continued to use heavy weapons banned by Minsk agreements. This includes the 82 and 120 millimeter mortars, as well as 120 and 152 millimeter artillery, as well as tanks. The vast majority of ceasefire violations took place in the Mariupol sector, stretching from Mar'yinka and Krasnohorivka all the way to Talakivka and Shirokino village on the Azov Sea coast. In the Luhansk sector, regular ceasefire violations were registered in the areas of Novoalexandrivka, Novozvanivka, and Popasna. The militants opened fire from the artillery in Popasna that resulted in civilian casualties. Another tragic incident happened in the vicinity of Lopaskino village close to Shastya on October 29th. There, a mobile counter-smuggling group of the State Fiscal Service came under hostile fire. Servicemen of the Ukrainian Armed Forces and Border Guards quickly arrived to the area to tackle the attack and accompany operatives of the State Fiscal Service to safety and in order to get medical treatment. However, most intense clash between Ukrainian army and Russia-backed militants took place in the industrial area of Avdiivka Donetsk sector on October 27th. Russian military command had 2 goals: to capture a larger foothold in Avdiivka and to motivate the militants by artificially escalating the conflict. First, Russian proxies opened fire from heavy mortars at Ukrainian positions in Avdiivka, Opytne village, and Shakhta Butovka military positions. Soon it turned out to be a distraction to hide a real goal of capturing positions in the industrial area of Avdiivka. Several hundreds of militants, artillery batteries, and drones were engaged in this offensive. After heavy artillery shelling, Russian proxy forces tried to assault the position of Ukrainian troops. And the Ukrainian troops received additional reinforcements and fought away the enemy offensive. After the failed attack, the militants opted for a usual strategy of distant mortar and artillery fire. According to Ukraine's military intelligence, the enemy suffered heavy casualties and had to drop their policy of fire escalation. Besides the attack, Russia-backed militants committed a war crime that evening. This time they fired from heavy weapons at the occupied Makiyivka. The fire was registered from the areas close to Mineralny village, Yakovlivka, and Yasinuvata, all controlled by the militants. This crime against civilians pursued the only goal, that is to intimidate local population who might have heard about the botched attack and to blame Ukrainian armed forces for violating Minsk agreements. Ukraine's military intelligence reports of casualties among Russian proxies. Over the last week, 45 militants were killed in action and 30 were wounded in action. The enemy forces also lost one Tiger armored vehicle, 2 Ural trucks, and one 82mm mortar. Last week, 4 Ukrainian servicemen were killed in action. 35 were wounded in action. And 3 operatives, that includes the 3 operatives of the National Fiscal Service. 3 more servicemen were injured as a result of booby traps explosions. Our hearts go out to the families and friends of the fallen Ukrainian heroes. 2 civilians were injured last week. That includes a male teenager who was injured in Popasna, Luhansk sector during artillery shelling launched by the Russian-backed militants on October 25th. Another victim was a man who was hit by a booby trap in an attempt to leave the occupied territories via Mayorsk government checkpoint on October 26th. 20 buildings and infrastructure facilities were damaged as a result of hostile shellings in Popasna, Pivnichne, Avdiivka, Krasnogorivka, and Mariinka. Furthermore, there were 16 registered incidents of hostile attacks on power and gas supply lines, mainly in Verkhnyatoretske, Avdiivka, Krasnogorivka, Mariinka, and Mariupol suburbs. Over the week, Ukrainian authorities arranged access and safe passage through government checkpoints on the contact line of 26 vehicles loaded with humanitarian aid for civilian population who live in the occupied territories of eastern Ukraine. The total payload of aid exceeded 442 tons. It includes food, construction materials, and medical equipment. Humanitarian assistance was provided by the International Committee for the Red Cross, Ukrainian public and Ukrainian religious charity organizations. Meanwhile, Russia's major so-called support to Ukraine continues to be weapons and hardware for its occupation contingent. 15 battle tanks, 7 armored vehicles, and 11 Grad multiple rocket launchers crossed the Russia-Ukraine border via Izvariny checkpoint, which is not currently controlled by the Ukrainian government. That'll be all. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pidgornyy. At this point, the press conference is finished. Looking forward to seeing you here next Monday.
Thank you.
Шановні колеги, на цьому робочий день в українському кризовому медіа-центрі завершено. Інформація щодо прес-конференції, анонсу і розкладу прес-конференції на завтра з'явиться на нашому сайті в рубриці «Розклад» близько 5 години вечора.